But we're going to begin with the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. As the deadline for the ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran nears, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is urging Iran to, quote, choose wisely. In a new conference this morning, Hegseth said the U.S. military blockade of Iran's ports is, quote, ironclad. He also warned Iranian military leaders that, quote, our capabilities are not the same. Take a listen to more of what he had to say today.
Iran can choose a prosperous future, a golden bridge, and we hope that you do for the people of Iran. In the meantime, and for as long as it takes, we will maintain this blockade, successful blockade. But if Iran chooses poorly, then they will have a blockade and bombs dropping on infrastructure, power, and energy.
All right, for more on this, I want to bring in retired Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster. He's a CBS News contributor who formerly served as National Security Advisor during the first Trump administration. So, General, always great to have you, my friend. We spoke yesterday with another former National Security Advisor to President Trump, name you will know, Ambassador John Bolton.
There are a lot of them.
Touche. So we spoke with Ambassador John Bolton, and he said something that was interesting to us, General. He said that he believes that the president is improvising his approach to Iran day by day. Now, you know that improvisation is sometimes critical in making decisions. You never know when you're going to meet up with Murphy, especially on the battlefield. And so you do adapt and improvise in the wake of that. But it strikes me that what he was suggesting is that there was a set of objectives that they thought that they could achieve very early on. And since those objectives were not achieved, now the improvisation comes. What do you make of his assessment of that, the improvisation that he believes the president is doing on a day-by-day basis?
Well, Vlad and Kelly, great to be with you. You know, there has been a lot of inconsistency in the communications in terms of objectives. But once you get through all that, it is pretty clear that what is necessary, what is a necessary outcome, is to prevent Iran from projecting power outside of its borders. I mean, what it has done in terms of, striking against 14 different countries, holding the global economy at risk. I think what's really important now is to ensure that the regime doesn't have those capabilities any longer. And I think, of course, the best way to do that is to have a fundamental shift in the nature of the regime such that it ceases this permanent hostility, to the United States, Israel, and its Gulf neighbors. And I think the regime is under duress. What you're seeing, I think, in these negotiations is the results of the fragmentation of the regime and really inconsistent approaches on the Iranian side.
Lieutenant General, we mentioned that there was the news conference with Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth this morning. We heard a lot about the blockade, a lot about the repercussions if ships were to try and, breach that blockade. What was your reaction to all of that?
Well, I think it's a really wise move, Kelly, to blockade the Iranian ships because they were able to have it both ways initially by shutting down the shipping in the Gulf, again, holding the global economy hostage, bursting kind of like the economic model that sustains the Gulf states and security really being their economic model being based on security, and still be able to get the benefits of exporting their own oil and then setting up the toll booth, in the Strait of Hormuz. So they're losing about $400 to $500 million of revenue a day based on the blockade. So what you're seeing is just another incentive for them to meet the demands of the U.S. administration, of the Trump administration. They said really two preconditions. One is, hey, reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and the second one is for them to stop this kind of onslaught against their neighbors, and then also to stop funding the so-called axis of resistance, the network of terrorist organizations in the region. And of course, the Iranian delegation that's in Pakistan, they started to compromise on some of that, and then some of the leadership from their Security Council, the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, they tried to get them to leave Pakistan, the delegation to leave Pakistan. So you're seeing real evidence of the fragmentation of the Iranian regime.
So I also want to ask you about what's happening in Ukraine, switching gears here. We're seeing one of the deadliest attacks in months there. The president promised to get a peace deal between the Ukrainians and the Russians day one. That obviously hasn't happened. But what do you know, or what are you learning about efforts to achieve peace in the region? And perhaps this administration, I know that the United States can do several things at once, but has the distraction become now the Iran war and what's happening in Ukraine put on the back burner for now?
Well, Vlad, I think what's really important is to look at the connections between what's happening in the Middle East in connection with the war against Iran and the war in Ukraine. Russia is one of the most important supporters for the Iranian regime, along with China. Remember, it's the Shahed drones, that have been such a big part of the onslaught against Ukraine. And what Russia's trying to do is really not only gain as much territory as it can prior to any negotiations, is to take over the whole Donbass. And they're taking what I think, Vlad, are unsustainable levels of casualties in their effort to do that. But really what they want to do is they want to break apart NATO. They want to rend the transatlantic relationship. And the tensions that have emerged between the U.S. and Europe give Putin a little bit more hope maybe on this as well. So I don't think you're going to get any kind of a ceasefire, any kind of a path toward peace in Ukraine until Vladimir Putin concludes that he's losing or that he can't sustain the war at an acceptable cost. And this is why the outcome in Iran, it's really important to be able to resolve or get on a path to resolving the conflict in Ukraine as well.
All right, Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster, sir, thank you as always.
Hey, great to be with you. Thank you.